Thanks, Minister. Good morning. 183 new cases in the community today. That takes us to 1,417 active cases of COVID in the community. Of the 183 today, 94 of those are in the northern suburbs, of which 53 are in the Hume LGA and 17 in Moreland. So we continue to see a very strong concentration in our northern suburbs. We have 15 new cases in the western suburbs, including 21 in Wyndham. We have 11 cases in the southeast, including 4 in Casey and 3 in Kingston. We have 9 cases in our inner city area, in the CBD, so 8 in Melbourne CBD and 1 case in the City of Yarra. And we have a couple of cases in the eastern suburbs and 2 cases in the inner south. There are also 6 cases in Shepparton. And finally, we have 1 case in Wodonga. We'll come on to that in a moment. That takes us to 175 cases in total. There are 8 cases that are still under investigation. They dropped late last night. So the overall outbreak map continues to be very, very clear. Very heavy concentration of community cases in the northern suburbs, in the western suburbs, and we have a significant number of teams working in those areas to support people living with COVID at this point in time. We're continuing to see a small number of cases in other parts of our suburbs. And again, I stress to all Victorians and all Melburnians, please be aware that we are seeing more cases. And that means there is a greater risk of you encountering people who may have COVID. And all those COVID safe protocols are now such an important thing for all of us to be using at all times. One of the cases last night is a truck driver who lives in Wodonga. He has a number of interstate exposure sites, but none in Victoria. And as soon as he became symptomatic, he immediately got tested and isolated at home. My thanks to him for doing that so swiftly, and a critical part, of course, of us continuing to support the interstate freight industry. In terms of other couple of areas of interest, we mentioned yesterday Japara Aged Care in Carrum. I'm pleased to confirm that we've had, although there is 1 positive staff member who was double vaccinated, there have been no other positive cases identified in that facility. All the resident testing and staff testing has come back negative. We'll of course continue to support that site over the coming days. We do have a positive healthcare worker at Northern Health. The infection, we believe, was acquired outside of the facility. We're just working through potential exposure sites and other staff impacts. But again, as we've seen in the last few weeks, strong protocols within our healthcare system around use of PPE and COVID safe protocols, we believe should reduce the number of people impacted by that exposure. My thanks to the whole Northern Health team for their swift response to this late yesterday and over the coming days. We have found over 30 cases now in a very small concentration in Roxburgh Park and Coolaroo, a small retail strip. A lot of really close community engagement. My thanks to the local traders and the local community for coming together for us to explore and understand better the nature of transmission in that area. There is a strong level of support in place to support not only those cases but also those local retailers and local businesses, and we are putting out more messaging. I would encourage people, particularly in that Roxburgh Park, Coolaroo area, if you're using some of those retail strips, please come forward and get tested. We really want to understand how far that transmission may have gone through. We mentioned the other day the Box Hill construction site. There have been a couple of other cases coming in today, so we now have 63 cases associated with our Box Hill construction site, and again it shows how quickly those numbers can start to grow at those really intense workplaces. We also have another construction site at Classy Kitchens in Craigieburn, where we've identified 14 cases, and the positive cases currently in the first 24 hours are more than half the people who are working on site at various points in time. So we're seeing a very high attack rate, and it's a message to all those who are continuing to operate businesses at this time, those essential businesses that we are maintaining. So important that your COVID safe protocols are as strong as you can possibly make them. Now that we're seeing levels of community transmission that we've not seen for a long time, you need to ensure that all your workforces are as well protected as they can be, and we avoid these amplification events at individual work sites. There are literally hundreds of people, thousands of people on the ground dealing with this COVID response across Melbourne in particular, and of course in other parts of our Victorian community. We've got teams from our health services and our community health providers. We've got local councils. We've got colleagues, as the Minister's indicated, colleagues from our family and community support teams out there working with communities to support them on the ground. Yesterday we did over 900 visits by authorised officers for people isolating to make sure that they were getting the support that they needed, and again pleased to report really high levels of compliance. And of course we have literally thousands of people working in our vaccination centres and testing centres. We will continue to provide and drive all that support because we are so determined to contain as much as we can these outbreaks we're seeing in certain parts of our community. But I would like to thank every single person who's out there, all those volunteers and those frontline staff who are doing the hard yards day after day after day. It is so important they continue to do what they do so that we can support the people who are living with COVID at this time and minimise the onward transmission as we continue to vaccinate as many Victorians as possible. I would like to make a particular shout out to the work of our industry engagement teams across government. Over the last 4 weeks, they visited over 600 construction sites to ensure that those COVID safe protocols were being well adhered to, and that people on those sites knew exactly what they had to do to keep those sites safe. Over 90% of those sites visits went exceptionally well with really strong processes in place. So my thanks to the whole industry and to all the guys working on site for maintaining those really strong disciplines day after day after day. But we have found a small number, less than 10%, who weren't compliant. 54 sites where, particularly in that light commercial construction sector, where mask wearing wasn't as strong as it needed to be, site registers were not as strong as they needed to be, cleaning arrangements were not as strong as they needed to be. And it's in those kind of gaps that we can see cases like the Box Hill construction site suddenly jump to 60 plus positive cases. If you've got those gaps in your systems and protocols, that's where COVID will get in and will spread rapidly across your workforce and across your site. We have, of course, issued a number of enforcement notices to those sites who are not complying. But again, it's a big shout out and a big call out to everybody. Thank you for the work you're doing to keep your messages, to keep your systems and your businesses safe. But please continue to do all you can to keep them as safe as possible now that we're dealing with the Delta variant. Finally, of course, or two more things, in terms of vaccination, we're of course delighted to be launching the VCE vaccination drive from tomorrow morning. For all the schools will be communicating clearly to VCE students, both Year 12 students and those Year 11 students doing their VCEs or doing VCE subjects this year. You will get advice about where to call and how to take one of those bookings. The call centre opens tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. There are sufficient spaces for everybody. We have reserved spaces for every Year 12 and Year 11 student doing VCE subjects to make sure that you can get your vaccination between the 7th and 19th of September. So although I do want people to book in, you will need to book in to get access to those slots. If you're not getting in at 8 o'clock, you'll have the whole day, the coming days, to make those bookings, and those vaccines will be reserved for you to have between the 7th and the 19th of September. So don't stress, we are there to get it done, and we'll work with you over the next couple of weeks to make sure you get your vaccine before you go to your first VCE subjects and before the GAT exam. Finally, again, as the Premier said, getting tested is our way through this. Getting vaccinated is important, and getting tested at the earliest signs of symptoms. There are $450 test isolation payments available, and I'm pleased to confirm that over 6,000 people a day are applying for those test and isolation payments. If you need that extra bit of support to get tested because you can't afford to miss a day of work, you can't afford a shift, you need that extra income, then please get tested, knowing that 6,000 people a day are applying and getting those test and isolation payments, and we will continue to honour that because it's the most important thing now is that we stop the onward spread of COVID whilst we get Victoria vaccinated.